What's up, ninjas? Brendan here, continuing with my Devin session where I'm building a Devin control panel. Now, you can see here that was my original prompt from the first video. And you can see here it's looked at the two repos and it's done the initial instructions, which is great. It's pretty much summarized what I've asked it to do, right? Which is get context, then front load any permission access discovery, and then also restate understanding before going to phase two. Don't do anything in phase two. So then it's churned through all of this stuff. Took about 5 minutes to do that. And let's just scroll through. And here's its output, right? So it's completed the analysis. So it's accurately said, right? Devin Control C, Control Center is an orchestration service that listens for GitHub issues on a project, a target project. Then it enqueues those issues um, in a database, and then those issues get automatically put into a V2 Kanban board in the to-do column. A polling loop, right? Yep, that's right. And it has a concurrency limit for how many can be worked on at the same time. And then it checks the status by polling as well, and then mirrors the state onto the Kanban board. So as Devin completes the sessions or is unable to finish them, it moves them to in progress and then done, or in progress and then blocked. Then it handles resumptions. So if a user manually drags a blocked card back to the to-do, it triggers a restart with a new session, or resumption of an existing session. Then there's observability via a metrics endpoint, as well as a specific type of endpoint which modifies the metrics endpoint such that it can be ingested into a third-party service such as Superset. And yeah, and then the config file contains some keys that essentially any of the API keys, they need to be encrypted at rest. Yeah, so all the slices have been implemented, and the job here is for Devin to analyze and fix everything. So it's gone ahead and verified that the unit tests, integration tests actually have run. Um, and correctly identifies that end-to-end tests have not actually been done, which is accurate, and essentially what Devin's job is here to do, right? We need to create a config file, and there are no current issues, and therefore the Kanban board is empty, etc. Okay, so then it's gone and used it's gone and looked at the Kanban board and discovered that this is what's on it. Great. And then it's asked for it. I think it already has this uh, from a previous Kanban board, but I'm going to tell it later not to do that. Yeah, and then it's identified that it's got the wrong type of GitHub PAT implemented in the code. I've asked for fine-grained access, fine-grained GitHub tokens, but here the implementation is using a classic PAT. That's it's already identified a bug without even, starting work on the implementation. And yeah, Devin API key. So this is something that I realized that I will get stuck on, because if you look at it here, this is the primary way this dashboard needs to work, right? So it needs authorization, and then it needs a token, right? A Devin v3 API token. However, right, if I follow the instructions on how to get it, right, I actually cannot do it. And I was wondering, why does that menu not exist? And it turns out that I'm on an individual plan, right? And And it turns out that I'm on an individual plan, right? And not a team or enterprise plan. And only the latter is allowed to create sessions programmatically, which is a core feature that I need, which unfortunately means that this is not going to work at all. So I'm going to push the problem back to Devin later on and see what it does, right? All right, so for webhook secret, right? Um, yeah, so it's identifying a potential problem, which is that this bot needs its own exposed endpoint for the webhook from GitHub to call into, or from Devin to call into, whatever it wants to do, and that does not exist because this is not a deployed application. So therefore, it needs a tunnel of some sort. So that's great that it's identified that. Yep, correct. So the specification asks for an interactive password, but in this case, we'll do it programmatically. I think the implementation will need to be modified to use .env. And it's asking me several clarifying questions, which I am going to answer one at a time, right? So let me just go ahead and do that. For the Kanban review column, I have just removed the review column from the Kanban board. Thanks for catching that. All right, so I have just gone ahead and finished dictating and then editing um, to clean it up, right? So for the Kanban review, I've said, okay, that's a mistake in the board. Let's fix the board. Fair enough. The column names also don't match exactly. Use IDs. That's fine. So with Devin, what I stated earlier on is I need a Devin API key, but then I don't actually have the ability to get one on the plan that I'm on, an individual one. So that's problematic. And I'm throwing it back to Devin to figure out a solution to that. For the GitHub personal access token, I'm essentially telling it that it needs to switch the implementation to fine-grained PAT. For webhooks, I've agreed with it and said, let's use a tunnel such as ngrok. For the dog fooding scope, yeah, so essentially it's picked up my intent, even though I guess I was slightly ambiguous in the initial instruction. It's clarified. Great. So yes, that's exactly what I want. One of the things that I'll do is basically one of the things that I added actually is that I'll give it some additional leeway at the beginning to not dog food itself, and then as and when the features start working better, then it can start dog fooding that. I think that's a really good way for it to test itself. All right, bot usernames. I wasn't actually sure what this question would be about, but I said I'll just use Devon Control C bot as the username. Let's see if that works. I'm still not 100% clear. And for manual tests, yes, there end-to-end manual tests do not actually have JS files. So I said, why don't you just write those JS files and have markdown in comments within the JS files, as like to document the task that needs to be done for the manual tests. So yeah, I've said, why don't you just have a JavaScript file with Markdown as a comment that describes the test needed for the manual test, the steps needed for the manual test. All right, so let's fire that off to Devin and let's see what it does. I'm not actually going to wait for Devin to fully do the response. I'll just catch you at the end of it. All right. So Devin has churned for a couple of minutes, and actually slightly longer than that. And yeah, I was reading the what Devin was thinking as it was going through all the things, and it turns out that in lieu of an Devin v3 API key, we can use Devin personal access token. So it looks like I'm not blocked after all, right? Um, Let me just open the docs. Oh, it is a closed beta and feature flag. Please contact support to request access. Okay, that is maybe back to blocked. Let's see what support is. All right, it's support at cognition.ai. So looks like I'm back to square one. I was hopeful. Okay, so let's assume that is not a problem. I'll solve it by contacting support, or some other means. And yeah, okay, so right, and it has found this caveat. So maybe there is a consumption endpoint that's on organization. Maybe we'll see. All right, I need two secrets to proceed with phase two. All right, need the Devin personal access token as well as a fine-grained GitHub PAT. Okay, that's a good clarification. There are two different API endpoints. Okay, great. And then it's asked me to provide the secrets rather than typing it in directly into the chat, which is great. Excellent. And of course, I put it to sleep. All right. So that's it for this video, right? Just wanted to show you um, like what I do to use Devin to clarify the next thing. So it looks like I'm currently blocked at the moment using the Devin API key or the Devin personal access token, which appears to also be a closed beta. So let's see how I go with this next. All right, see you in the next video. Bye.